Imagine believing that your love was unbreakable, that your marriage was built on honesty and trust, only to have everything shattered in one final, heartbreaking confession. In the closing moments of her life, his wife revealed a secret she had guarded for years. Welcome to True Story 102. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's 1955, a turbulent time when America was still divided by the color of its skin. In a country gripped by the harsh realities of racial segregation, Jim Crow laws dictated every aspect of an African American's life, where they could walk, eat, sit, or even cast a glance. Interracial relationships weren't just taboo, they were perilously forbidden. A black man found with a white woman risked everything. Stay tuned as we unravel this unforgettable tale of love, danger, and secrets that defied a divided nation. Born into hardship in a small town in Georgia, Ethan Davis had learned early that life was unyielding. His father had labored in a factory, while his mother scrubbed floors in upscale white homes. From the moment he could walk, Ethan helped fix cars alongside his uncles, learning how engines groaned and breathed under hard work. By 18, he was a mechanic in a modest auto shop, one of the few honest jobs where an African American could work without having a white boss looming over him. Ethan was tall and lean, with skin as dark as polished mahogany. His quiet confidence unnerved white men and intrigued white women, a perilous mix in the world he inhabited. And yet, he never indulged in that very danger until Emily Carter entered his life. Unlike those he had been warned about, Emily carried no trace of fear in her eyes when they met. Raised in privilege in a prominent white family, she had spent her childhood in silk dresses and expensive shoes. Her days were regimented with etiquette lessons and social events designed to shape her into the perfect Southern lady. Her father, Charles Carter, was a powerful businessman whose wealth came not only from shrewd investments, but also from the influence he wielded over others. He prized bloodlines and purity, confident in the superiority of those who shared his complexion. Yet Emily had never felt at home in that rigid world. Suffocated by expectations, she had grown curious and restless, searching for something beyond the perfectly ordered life laid out for her. The night she met Ethan, at age 18, a summer heat clung to her as she donned a dress deemed too bold, too revealing. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and cigarette smoke as she stepped into a dim basement where the smooth, electric notes of jazz whispered defiance against segregation. It was one of the few secret gatherings where young people, black, white, and everything in between, blended together, sharing drinks, laughter, and glances that daylight would never allow. Ethan first noticed her there. Her blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her blue eyes shone with dangerous curiosity and bold defiance. When she asked his name, he hesitated, yet her smile urged him to speak in a low, cautious tone, as though he were testing the space between them. They talked for hours, their words sliding effortlessly into one another. She was fascinated by his background, the way he spoke and thought. He, in turn, was captivated by her audacity, the way she seemed immune to the fears that governed his daily life. It was intoxicating, it was reckless, and it was inevitable. When the night drew to a close, she told him she wanted to see him again, and despite knowing he should walk away, he could not. The first time her father encountered them together was purely accidental. Ethan had been working late at the auto shop when Emily appeared at the edge of the garage, her pale skin illuminated by the street lamp's glow. His heart clenched as he glanced around, his pulse hammering in his ears. Shouldn't he have been there? It wasn't he safe. But before he could usher her away, a black sedan pulled up. Charles Carter stepped out and, in that frozen moment, Ethan saw understanding and a sudden, Fierce rage flashed in the man's eyes, the kind of fury reserved for white men who felt entitled to express it without restraint. Emily tried to speak, but her father silenced her, with a glare so cold it might have frozen the summer air. Without another word, he seized her arm and dragged her away. Ethan did not move. He knew better than to follow. The next morning, a note was slipped under the garage door. "Stay away from my daughter." It was not a warning, but a threat. For the first time, Ethan realized he was not so much afraid of white men like Charles Carter, as he was terrified of what he might risk for Emily. The ensuing weeks became a living hell for Emily. Confined at home, every step she took was watched, every phone call monitored. Her father refused even to acknowledge her presence, as if speaking to her might tarnish his reputation, while her mother silently observed with inscrutable eyes. Emily fought back, arguing, screaming, pleading, but her father's will was absolute, and no cord would side with a daughter defying the man who claimed ownership over her life. Yet, she managed a daring escape. A letter discreetly slipped into a delivery boy's pocket, a hushed message passed to a maid who had once known love beyond the color lines, and a secret midnight meeting once more. Emily found Ethan. This time, she told him what he already suspected. Her father would never permit them to be together. But she had made her choice. Choosing him was reckless, dangerous. A white woman eloping with a black man was not merely scandalous, it was criminal. There would be no mercy, no understanding, no forgiveness. Yet love cared not for laws. And so, in the dead of night, with nothing but the clothes on their backs and fire in their hearts, they ran. They ran from the grip of her father's power, from a world that would never accept them, heading toward an uncertain future without guarantees, only the hope that together they could carve out a life of their own. They did not know that the real danger was only beginning. Under a heavy night sky, Emily's hands trembled as she clutched a small suitcase filled with her few prized belongings: a dress, a few coins, a photograph of her mother whose significance even she couldn't explain. It was absurd how little she could carry from the life she was leaving behind, her home, her name, her status. Meanwhile, Ethan waited at the edge of town beneath the shadows of an abandoned train station. He carried no suitcase, no photographs. His life had always been light enough to bear. When Emily saw him, she longed to run and throw herself into his arms, letting all fear dissolve, but she steadied herself. There was no time for softness or hesitation. They had but one chance to vanish. The freight train bound for an industrial town in Indiana was scheduled to depart within the hour. A destination where mixed-race couples, though uncommon, were not illegal. It was their best hope. Emily glanced back one final time, half expecting to see her father's men storming after her, dragging her back to the life she'd fled. But the streets lay empty, and though the fear lingered, Ethan took her hand, rough, calloused, and sure. "Are you certain?" he murmured quietly. Emily swallowed hard and nodded. They boarded the train, hidden among crates and sacks of grain. No one saw them depart. No one knew where they were bound. For the first time, Emily felt free. The journey was long and grueling. They traveled in darkness, their bodies stiff from crouching in the narrow space between cargo boxes. The clattering of the train wheels echoed in Emily's bones, a stark reminder that there was no turning back. Ethan spoke little. He was ever vigilant, tensing at each stop, waiting for the sound of approaching footsteps, for the doors to creak open and reveal armed men ready to tear them apart. But on the second night, in Indiana, no one came. The industrial town was a world apart from the elegant streets of Emily's childhood. The air was thick with smoke, the buildings soot-covered, and the people exhausted from long hours of labor. Yet here they were, a white woman standing beside a black man, and no one batted an eye. It wasn't acceptance, it was indifference, and that indifference was enough. They found shelter in a cramped boarding house with thin walls that offered little privacy. Their room was barely large enough for the narrow bed they shared, but it was theirs. Ethan secured a job at the local steel mill, enduring 12-hour shifts in oppressive heat, while Emily worked as a seamstress, her fingers blistering from endless hours of stitching. It was hard, grueling work, nothing like the life she'd known, but she never complained, for at last she had chosen this life. Their wedding was a modest affair held in a tiny church on the outskirts of town. No guests, no flowers, no music, just the two of them and a preacher who mutely pronounced their vows. There was no ring, no celebration, only a quiet exchange of promises spoken not for the world, but for each other. After the ceremony, Emily stood outside the church, gazing upward as the weight of the moment settled upon her. She was no longer Emily Carter, daughter of privilege, she was Emily Davis, wife of a black man in a world that would never fully accept them, and yet she felt lighter than ever before. The first year of their marriage was a trial. Although the industrial town was safer than the deep South, kindness was in short supply. Ethan's co-workers kept their distance, uncertain how to regard the man who had dared to love a white wife, while local women eyed Emily as if she were lost, confused, or merely foolish. They were tolerated, but never welcomed. Money was always scarce. Some nights they went to bed hungry. Emily learned to mend garments until they were more stitched than fabric. Ethan learned to stretch every dollar, bargaining for scraps at the market, and working overtime until his body ached. They endured because love had carried them thus far, but love did not erase fear. Emily's father had not forgotten. Letters began arriving at the boarding house, each colder than the last. The first demanded, "Come home now." The second warned, "You don't understand what you've done." The third threatened, "You will regret this." Emily burned them all, yet the fear lingered. Her father was not a man accustomed to defeat. One day he would find her, and she did not know what he would do. That fear seeped into her dreams, whispered at the market, and spiked whenever she heard footsteps behind her at night. Without telling Ethan, she began to save money, first a few coins hidden under the mattress, then bills secreted in the hem of her dress. She told herself it was merely precaution, a habit born from fear rather than doubt, but deep inside she knew the truth. Though she had chosen Ethan, part of her still feared that one day she might have to leave him behind. Years passed, and life in the industrial town settled into a weary rhythm, never easy, never entirely comfortable, but undeniably theirs. Ethan labored relentlessly, returning home each night with aching muscles and soot-stained hands, while Emily stitched garments until her once delicate fingers grew rough with calluses. They built their life together, piece by fragile piece. Then their first child arrived. Emily was more terrified than she had ever been. She had imagined the joy of cradling her newborn as Ethan held him close, watching their family grow. But when she saw the tiny boy wrapped in blankets, she felt only guilt, a guilt born from the memory of the child she had once abandoned. Back when she was 17, a different girl in a different life, her family had concealed her pregnancy. They had hidden her away, claiming she was ill and needed rest. She had never been given a choice. When her baby boy was born, a boy much like this one, she had scarcely held him before he was quietly put up for adoption, arranged by her father with a discreet payment to erase any record of the Whitmore name. Emily had wept for weeks, then learned to suppress the pain, convincing herself that the child would have a better life without her. Then she met Ethan and buried that past beneath a new life, a new love. But now, holding her newborn son in her arms, the past clawed its way back. There was another child, a son lost before he'd ever known her. She never told Ethan. The weight of that secret settled into her bones like a constant, gnawing guilt. Their son, Caleb, grew quickly, his skin a rich blend of his parents' hues, his eyes as sharp as Ethan's, his smile as gentle as Emily's. He was the first thing they had truly built together, a living testament to their love. Yet Emily could not shake the feeling that something was missing. In quiet moments, she wondered if the child she'd given away might resemble Caleb, if he had her nose or Ethan's steady gaze. Did he ever think of the mother he never knew? She never mentioned it, burying the thought deep and devoting herself entirely to Caleb, Ethan, and their fragile life. But the past always finds a way to reemerge. Before long, another child arrived, a spirited girl named Madison, wild from the start, whose boisterous laughter filled every corner of their cramped boarding house. She bore none of her mother's gentleness, nor her father's quiet reserve. She was a force unto herself, a storm wrapped in a little body. Emily adored her, yet with each passing year the secret grew heavier. She imagined that lost son, now grown a young man, living in some unknown city, perhaps in a modest house much like theirs, wondering who he was. Emily prayed he had been given a good life, prayed he had never felt abandoned, and fervently hoped Ethan would never learn the truth. But secrets poison everything. Gradually, Emily became quieter and more distant. At first, Ethan believed it was exhaustion. Parenthood was hard, and their life was far from easy, but then he noticed the way she'd stare off into the distance, lost in thought, the way she hesitated when asked about her past, and flinched whenever adoption was mentioned, even in passing. Ethan was not a proud man. He respected silence and understood that some wounds were too deep to touch. Yet this was different. This was his wife, and she was slipping away. One night, long after the children had gone to bed, he found her sitting at the small wooden table in their kitchen, staring at a torn scrap of fabric in her lap. She did not notice him at first. In that moment, Ethan felt a distance between them that terrified him. There were things she was not telling him, things she never would, and for the first time he wondered if he truly knew his wife. Emily had always known marriage was not the fairy tale that books and movies promised. Even as a child, she understood that love and survival were often two separate things, but she never expected to live in a marriage built on both. Ethan was a good husband, steady, patient, reliable. He worked tirelessly at the steel mill and loved her with a quiet devotion. And yet, she carried a secret heavier than any love could lift. When she married him, it was not for love, but out of fear instilled by her father, who had always chosen her husband for her. In families like hers, with old Southern money and bloodlines tracing back to colonial wealth, women were chosen, not allowed to choose. For years, she had played along, smiling, nodding, and accepting the suitors her father selected until Ethan appeared, a man from a world she never knew, challenging everything she'd been taught. She ran to him not out of love, but out of terror at what her life might become if she did not. That realization was bitter for many years afterward, though she eventually grew to love him, the way he kissed her forehead each morning before work, the way he gently rocked their children to sleep. She never confessed the truth that when she married him, it had been a decision of survival, not of the heart. And though love eventually blossomed, the secret never left her. Then came the whispers, not from Ethan, but from the world around them. The women at the market looked at her as if she had lost her mind. The men sneered when Ethan passed by. Even the children questioned in hushed tones, "Mama, why does Dad look like he doesn't belong? Or why do other kids say I'm different?" Emily had no answers, for the truth was too ugly. She had spent so many years trying to forget her origins that she never considered what it meant for her children to live between two worlds. Worst of all, she never told Ethan that during the hardest months, when exhaustion and fear overwhelmed her, she had once contemplated leaving. In secret, she counted the money hidden away, wondering if it might be enough to take the children and vanish. She had never planned to do so, but the mere thought haunted her. Ethan noticed the way she avoided certain questions, how she hesitated when asked about her past, and how she fell silent when their children discussed race, belonging, and the differences that set them apart. He wondered not only about her secrets, but also about her love. Did she love him because he was her choice, or simply because he was her only escape? It was a question he dreaded asking, uncertain if he wanted the answer. Emily had convinced herself that the past was behind her, that the life she'd built, a modest yet safe home, was entirely separate from the one she'd left behind. Still, the outside world eyed them with suspicion. Inside, however, they had found a semblance of peace, a peace so fragile that the past crept back in unexpectedly. One ordinary afternoon, a thin, white envelope was slipped under the door, while Emily was out shopping, a ghostly reminder from another life. She stared at it for a long time before picking it up. There was no return address, only her name in handwriting unmistakably her father's. Her stomach twisted as she tore it open. The brief, cold words read, "You do not understand what you have done." She felt sick. It had been years since her father's letters had arrived, each demanding, threatening, and then silence. She had hoped he had given up, but she was wrong. Days later, while at the market letting the children chase one another between stalls, Emily saw him, a white man in a suit, standing on a street corner. He wasn't buying or talking to anyone, he was simply watching her. A chill ran through her. She told herself she was imagining things. But the next day, and the day after that, he appeared at a distance every time, always watching. Emily didn't tell Ethan she knew he would insist they confront the man if it was truly her father. Instead, she wished him to remain in the past where he belonged. Then came a second letter, different this time, not from her father, but from someone she never expected to hear from again. "I know who you are." Her heart stopped. The unfamiliar handwriting and vague message revealed that someone had uncovered the secret of her first child, the son she had abandoned so long ago. A secret so deeply buried it had nearly been forgotten. In that moment, the walls of her world began to crack. For days Emily said nothing. She barely slept or ate. Ethan asked her what was wrong. She brushed it off, but he sensed the change. When he discovered the letter hidden at the bottom of her dresser, his eyes shifted with the realization that there were things about her he never truly knew, even after all their years together. Emily had always known the past would catch up with her. She had spent years convincing herself that her new life was separate from the old life of Emily Carter, the timid daughter who had once been forced into a secret adoption. Yet that woman had never entirely disappeared. She lurked in the corners of her mind, waiting to resurface. As time passed, Emily's body began to betray her. A slow sickness emerged, a cough here, a dizzy spell there, until suddenly the pain became a sharp, relentless ache in her chest that robbed her of every breath. Ethan was the first to notice her struggle, the way she winced while lifting a heavy pot, how she faltered when she thought no one was watching. Eventually, one night as she collapsed while folding laundry, Ethan could no longer ignore it. A middle-aged white doctor arrived the next morning, his face impassive as he pressed his fingers to Emily's wrist, listening to the faint rhythm of her pulse. He asked questions in a voice so calm it belied the dire news. Her heart was failing, and nothing could be done. Ethan stood in silent agony, his hands clenched at his sides. Emily closed her eyes, expecting fear, but feeling only profound exhaustion from years of running. Yet she knew she could not leave this world without revealing the truth. A lifetime of secrets had weighed on her, and now it was time to set them free. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, Emily summoned Ethan to sit with her. He hesitated. There was something final in her tone. Fearful not so much of her impending death as of what she was about to confess, she told him everything. She recounted the money she'd hidden away, her doubts in the early years of their marriage, and her terror of needing to escape. She revealed the secret of her first child, the baby boy she had been forced to give up, and recounted how her father's shadow had haunted her even in death. Finally, with trembling sorrow, she confessed the worst truth, that when she married him, it had not been for love, but because she was desperate to escape her predetermined fate. Ethan sat in silence. He could not discern whether his expression held anger, pain, or emptiness. Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks as the weight of a lifetime of guilt pressed upon her. Then she whispered the one truth she clung to, despite everything: the lies, the secrets, the mistakes. She had come to love him deeply, more than she had ever thought possible. And she hoped that, in the end, that love would be enough. After that day, time blurred. Ethan spoke little but cared for her, tenderly holding her when the pain overwhelmed her, wiping her brow when fever struck, carrying her to bed when her legs could no longer support her. He never revealed his true feelings; he did not need to. In his silent devotion, his presence was enough. One frigid night, as the cold crept through their modest home and Emily's frail body grew too heavy to rise, she felt Ethan's arms around her. He murmured something so soft that she barely heard it. As she closed her eyes for the final time, a gentle smile spread across her face. In that moment she believed that he had forgiven her, or perhaps it did not matter, for love was not about perfection, but about choosing to stay even when it hurt, even when the past could never be undone, even when farewell was the only word left. Afterwards, the house became oppressively quiet, the kind of silence that seeped into the walls and the spaces between breaths, marking the absence of a body that would never rise again. Emily was gone, leaving Ethan alone in a bedroom that still held the faint imprint of her presence on the pillow. For days he left that pillow untouched, as if by doing so he could trick himself into believing she was still there. But the truth was inescapable. She was gone, and with her went a lifetime of secrets. Her final confession shattered something within Ethan, not because she had lied, but because he had never suspected that the life they had built might have been founded on survival rather than love. Had he ever truly been her choice? Or was he merely her escape from a life she dreaded? For years Ethan had fought to be seen as a man in a world that dismissed him, and now even in the home he'd built with the woman he loved, he questioned whether he had ever truly belonged. The letters remained yellowed and hidden in a drawer, full of threats and warnings. Then came one final, devastating note in a different hand. "Your son is looking for you." Ethan froze as he read those words. Their son, neither Caleb nor Madison, but the one she had given away, the child he never knew existed. His hands tightened around the paper. Another piece of Emily, another secret, had been kept from him, a son out there searching for answers. With that realization, all that remained were unanswerable questions. In the days that followed Emily's death, Ethan sat alone in the silent kitchen, the letter before him, reading, "Your son is looking for you," its words cutting like an open wound. Emily had carried that secret for years, letting it fester until now. For the first time since her passing, Ethan allowed himself to grieve not only for her, but for the life he had thought was real, a life that now seemed haunted by ghosts. The house felt different without her, the empty spaces, the absence of her gentle humming as she folded laundry, the quiet rhythm of her footsteps. It was as if every unsaid word, every hidden secret now pressed in on him. When he walked through the market, he could feel the weight of strangers' silent questions, and at night he reached for her out of habit only to find cold, empty sheets. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Ethan sat at the table and unfolded the letter once more. There was no name, no address, just a brutal fact. A son out there seeking answers, and Ethan was the only one left to provide them. He wrestled with the question for weeks. What good would it do to search for this boy, this unknown man? And yet another thought emerged. What if it were Caleb? If someone had taken him away, erased him, made him a secret? Wouldn't he want to know? Wouldn't he deserve the truth? So one early morning, before sunrise, Ethan left the house with a letter clenched in his hand. He walked to the post office, and for the first time since Emily's death, he made a decision. He would find this boy and give him the truth that had been stolen from him, even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. The past had already taken too much, and Ethan would not let it claim anything more. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, share this video with your friends, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. For more captivating stories, dear season
check
friends,
out our other
welcome
videos.
to True Story
See you in the next
102.
one.
In our next episode, we share the gripping journey of a devoted military officer, a father whose courage and sacrifice were tested by deep betrayal and hidden secrets. So grab a warm cup of tea, sit back, and get ready for a story that bridges the past and present, reminding us that true honor and resilience shine through life's toughest trials. Please comment below with your location and share your thoughts. Stay healthy and enjoy the show. The heavy oak door creaked open as Captain John Morgan stepped into his darkened home. The familiar scent of lemon polish, now tainted with something else, something wrong, revealed that 8 months overseas had sharpened his instincts right now. Every nerve in his body screamed that something was terribly amiss. The house stood silent, too silent for a Saturday morning when his family should be bustling about. Linda, Carter, Madison. His deep voice echoed through the empty hallway. There was no response, only the hollow tick of the grandfather clock his late wife Emily had loved so much. Then, almost imperceptibly, a whimper his combat-trained ears caught it immediately, coming from the kitchen. Moving swiftly, his heart pounded against his ribs. John reached the kitchen door, which was locked. What kind of house locks its kitchen door? His hands trembled as he found his key ring. One twist, and the truth he was about to discover would shatter everything he believed about family, trust, and the people we leave behind. "Daddy," came a faint voice from inside. "Is it really you?" The voice of his 15-year-old daughter, Madison, sounded different, broken, afraid. As the door swung open, the sight before him stopped his heart. His precious daughter, his only connection to Emily, was rising from a thin mattress on the cold kitchen floor. Her eyes were filled with tears and fear. This wasn't the homecoming he had imagined. This was the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel everything he thought he knew about the family he'd left behind. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now, let us continue with the story. Captain John Morgan was born into wealth, but he was rich in principles. At 42, his weathered face told the story of a man who had served his country proudly for 2 decades, earning decorations that hung modestly in his home office. Yet the most precious medal he'd ever received was the small, heart-shaped locket his late wife Emily had given him before she passed away during Madison's birth 15 years ago. For 5 years, John raised Madison alone, balancing military duties with bedtime stories, deployment preparations with dance recitals. Their bond grew unshakable, forged in the quiet moments when he'd brush her hair just as Emily had shown him, and in the proud afternoons watching her excel at science fairs. Madison inherited her mother's golden hair and determination, but her eyes were all John's deep blue pools that seemed to carry wisdom beyond her years. Then, Linda Carter entered their lives, a divorced mother of 2 boys. She seemed to understand the delicate balance of grief and hope that defined the Morgan household. Her sons, Jay and Kyle, appeared to be well-adjusted teenagers despite their own father's abandonment. Jay, now 17, showed a protective instinct toward his younger siblings, while 14-year-old Kyle shared Madison's passion for academics. The marriage 10 years ago had felt like a second chance at happiness for everyone. Yet, Linda's transformation from the warm, understanding woman who won John's heart to the person who would betray his trust so profoundly remained a mystery that would haunt him. She'd been a school counselor, known for her empathy and insight into troubled teens. Her own boys had thrived under her care, making the current situation even more bewildering. The family photos that lined the hallway told a story of holiday gatherings, shared laughter, and what appeared to be genuine love, a carefully constructed facade that crumbled before his latest deployment. John had believed he'd built something beautiful from the ashes of his grief. He had no way of knowing that his absence would trigger a chain of events that would test not only his family's bonds, but also the very meaning of loyalty, trust, and forgiveness. The kitchen's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Madison's makeshift bedroom. Captain John Morgan stood frozen, his military training failing him in the face of this domestic horror. A thin mattress lay in the corner, surrounded by carefully arranged school books and a small battery-operated reading lamp. The sight of his daughter's neatly folded clothes, stacked in plastic bins, made his stomach turn. She'd been living like this for months, adapting to circumstances no child should ever face. "How long?" John's voice cracked as he knelt beside Madison, who was now clutching his uniform jacket as if she might disappear. The question hung heavy in the air, mixing with the lingering scent of microwave dinners and cleaning supplies since March. Madison whispered her words, barely audible. "When you stopped writing." She pulled away slightly, reaching under her mattress to retrieve a bundle of envelopes tied with a faded blue ribbon. "Linda said you weren't writing anymore because you'd found a new family overseas. But I knew you wouldn't do that, Daddy." John's hands trembled as he examined the unopened letters, each bearing his distinctive handwriting. Every week, without fail, he'd written to his daughter, sharing stories of his deployment, asking about her studies, and reminding her of his love. The postmarks told their own story. Linda had systematically intercepted every letter for the past 6 months. The reality of this situation began to crystallize. This was a simple case of family discord or stepmother-stepdaughter tension. This was calculated cruelty, a methodical dismantling of a child's world. The kitchen calendar on the wall caught his eye, dates marked with small red X's. Upon closer inspection, he realized they corresponded with Linda's weekend trips with the boys, leaving Madison locked away like some dark family secret. "She said it was temporary," Madison continued, her voice growing stronger now in her father's presence, "just until Kyle's room was renovated." But then, weeks passed, and she gestured to the makeshift living space she'd created. "I tried to make it work, Daddy. I even started learning to cook since I was here anyway." A weak smile crossed her face, an attempted bravery that broke John's heart. The sound of footsteps on the front porch interrupted their reunion. John's military instincts kicked in as he moved toward the kitchen door, positioning himself between it and his daughter. But instead of Linda's key in the lock, there came a gentle knock and a soft, concerned voice. "Madison, it's Karen Roberts. I brought you some lunch, honey." Karen Roberts stood at the kitchen door, a covered casserole dish in her trembling hands. She was everything Linda was, warm, genuine, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. For 6 months, she had been Madison's secret guardian, her presence a lifeline in an increasingly isolated world. "I'm Karen Roberts," she said, meeting John's questioning gaze. "I moved in next door about 7 months ago. Her voice carried the soft lilt of the Midwestern countryside, steady but cautious. "I've been watching over Madison when I could." John unlocked the door, noticing how Karen's eyes immediately went to Madison, checking for signs of distress, a practiced gesture that spoke volumes about their established routine. The aroma of homemade chicken pot pie filled the kitchen, and Madison's face brightened slightly. "I teach English at the local high school," Madison explained, straightening her wrinkled clothes. "I figured something was wrong when I saw you studying by flashlight through the kitchen window late one night." Karen set the casserole down, her hands clasping and unclasping nervously. "I tried reporting it, Captain Morgan, 3 times, actually, but Linda, she's well connected with the school board, respected in the community. She had explanations for everything," said Madison, troubled, making up stories for attention after her mother's death. Karen's voice caught. "They believed her over a new teacher in town." The full weight of Karen's involvement began to unfold. She had done more than provide meals. She'd slipped textbooks through the window, graded Madison's homework, and most importantly, given her hope through whispered conversations and notes passed through the crack under the kitchen door. She had kept Madison's spirit from breaking entirely. "I started bringing extra food when I realized the boys were gone every weekend," Karen continued, maintaining her professional composure as it cracked slightly. "Linda would leave sandwiches, but a growing teenager needs more than that. We developed a system. 3 taps on the window meant food, 2 meant Linda was coming, 1." She paused, looking at Madison. "Meant you're not alone." John watched as his daughter moved naturally to stand beside Karen, their bond evident in the gentle way the teacher's hand came to rest on Madison's shoulder. In his absence, this stranger had become his daughter's protector, risking her career and reputation in a town where Linda's influence ran deep. "There's more you need to know, Captain," Karen said softly, reaching into her bag. "About Jay and Kyle, things aren't what they seem." Karen withdrew a folded piece of paper from her bag, hesitating before handing it to John. It was a handwritten note in distinctly teenage handwriting. "Ms. Roberts, Mom took Madison's phone again. Can you make sure she gets my old calculus notes? Don't tell her they're from me. This isn't the only one," Karen explained, producing more notes. "Jay has been leaving his lunch money in Madison's locker since March, and Kyle has been slipping his desserts under the kitchen door when Linda isn't looking. They're trapped in their own way." Captain Morgan's eyes widened at the money and the extra food that was from Jay. His voice trembled with realization, but then Linda said, "They wanted me gone. They complained about sharing space with me." John spread the notes across the kitchen counter, each one telling a fragment of a larger, more disturbing story. Notes from Jay asking Karen to check on Madison during storms because she'd always been afraid of thunder. Messages from Kyle sharing answers to homework assignments through Karen, maintaining their unofficial study partnership despite their forced separation. "Your sons have been trying to protect her," Karen said softly to John. But Linda, she is masterful at manipulation. She tells Jay that one wrong move could send him back to his father. She reminds Kyle that she is the only one who has ever supported his academic dreams. She has created an environment of fear and dependency." A particularly revealing note caught John's attention. "Ms. Roberts, Mom is taking us to Florida this weekend," it read. "Said it's for my birthday, but it's not until November. Something is wrong. Please watch Madison, Kyle." The pieces were falling into place. Linda hadn't just isolated Madison. She had orchestrated a complex web of emotional manipulation, playing her children against each other while maintaining a perfect facade for the outside world. The weekend trips, the locked doors, the intercepted letters, all part of a calculated strategy to break the bonds between siblings and destroy any evidence of her actions. John's voice was hoarse as he asked, Where are they now? Still in Florida, Madison answered. Linda said they're touring colleges, but Kyle is only 14. Karen stepped forward, her teacher instinct for protection evident in her stance. Captain Morgan, Linda is scheduled to return tomorrow. Whatever you're planning, the children, all three of them, need to be protected. They've been fighting this battle alone for too long. A kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking time in a house where time had stood still for months. John Morgan, who had faced enemy fire without flinching, now felt a different kind of fear. This was a battlefield with clear enemies and allies. This was his home, and somewhere between his deployment and his return, it had become a psychological war zone with his children caught in the crossfire. By late afternoon, the Morgan home had become an investigation site, though not the kind Captain Morgan was accustomed to from his military career. The dining room table, once the center of family meals, now displayed a timeline of evidence that painted a disturbing picture of systematic abuse. With Karen's help, John methodically sorted through 8 months of family records. Bank statements revealed unexplained withdrawals from the children's college funds, money Linda had access to during his deployment. School records showed a stark contrast. While Kyle and Jay maintained their privileged positions in advanced placement courses, Madison's grades had plummeted, accompanied by numerous unexplained absences that Linda had authorized with practiced ease. The school trusted her implicitly, Karen explained, spreading out Madison's attendance records. Who would question a guidance counselor about her own family? A finger traced a pattern of absences that coincided perfectly with Linda's weekend trips. She detailed the administration that Madison was visiting colleges or attending family events no one thought to verify. The most damning evidence came from Madison's personal diary, discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the kitchen. The entries chronicled a gradual descent into isolation, beginning with subtle changes in Linda's behavior shortly after John's deployment. February 15th. Linda says the boys need more space for their studies. She suggested I move into the guest room temporarily. Dad would want me to be cooperative. March 3rd. The guest room furniture is gone. Linda says there was a mix-up with the donation center. I'm sleeping in the kitchen now. She promises it's just for a week. March 17th. My phone disappeared today. Linda says I must have lost it at school, but I saw it on her desk when I mentioned it. She reminded me how expensive it was for Dad to keep me in private school. John's hands trembled as he read entry after entry, each page revealing how his daughter's world had contracted, while Linda's control expanded. The diary entries became increasingly sparse as Madison's isolation grew, but one particular entry stood out, dated just 2 weeks ago. Jay sneaked me Mom's old locket today, he wrote. He said he found it in Linda's drawer with Dad's letters. Linda told me Mom never left anything for me. I knew she was lying. Mom did love me. I just have to hold on until Dad comes home. He always keeps his promises. The locket in question now lay on the table, a small, heart-shaped piece that had belonged to Emily, John's late wife. He had searched for it after Emily's death, wanting to give it to Madison when she was older. Linda had claimed it must have been lost in their last move. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the evidence of Linda's betrayal, John heard Karen's sharp intake of breath. She held up a stack of papers found in Linda's home office. Captain Morgan, she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, these are transfer papers. Linda has been planning to move the boys to a private school in Florida, and there's something else. She pulled out a document bearing an official letterhead paperwork to relinquish custody of Madison to the state, citing unmanageable behavioral issues. It was dated for next month. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. This wasn't just about isolation or emotional abuse. Linda had been systematically preparing to dismantle the entire family, piece by piece, all while maintaining her reputation as a devoted mother and respected community member. As evening descended on the Morgan home, Karen S.'s methodical search through Linda S.'s office revealed a hidden compartment in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a stack of medical records that would shed light on the darkness that had consumed their family. "These records date back 15 years, Karen said, her professional demeanor giving way to growing concern as she examined the documents. Linda was hospitalized for severe depression after her first husband abandoned her, and the boys she underwent extensive therapy. But then she paused. Scanning the more recent entries, she stopped taking her medication shortly after your deployment. Captain John leaned forward, examining the journal entries that chronicled Linda S.'s gradual descent. The handwriting evolved from neat, measured strokes to increasingly erratic scrawls. April 12th. John S. letters to Madison arrive every week like clockwork. He never wrote to the boys this much during his previous deployments. Jay asked about it today. I saw the hurt in his eyes, the same hurt I saw when their father left. May 3rd. Found Madison looking at old photos of Emily today. John keeps them everywhere perfect. Emily, beautiful. Emily, dead. Emily, who still has more presence in this house than I do. Even my own sons prefer her daughter to me now. June 15th. The medication makes everything foggy. How can I protect my boys if I can't think clearly? John S. unit reported casualties today. What if he doesn't come back? I want to let them take my sons from me again, not like before. The journal revealed a woman unraveling her grip on reality, distorted by untreated mental illness and deep-seated abandonment issues. Linda had created elaborate conspiracies in her mind, convincing herself that Madison was somehow turning her sons against her, that John S.'s deployment was actually abandonment in disguise. A separate folder contained emails between Linda and her ex-husband, revealing another layer of manipulation. She had been telling the boys that their father wanted nothing to do with them, while simultaneously blocking his attempts to maintain contact. The same pattern she would later repeat with John S. letters to Madison. Look at this, Karen said softly, holding up a recent bank statement. Large withdrawals every month sent to an address in Florida. She cross-referenced it with property records on her laptop. It's a beachfront condo purchased 3 months ago. She has been planning this for a while, systematically moving money and establishing a new life without Madison. John S. military training had taught him to analyze threats, but nothing had prepared him for this level of calculated domestic warfare. Linda hadn't just been isolating Madison, she had been systematically erasing all traces of Emily and John from their lives, creating a narrative of abandonment that would justify her actions to her sons. An alert chimed on Karen S.'s phone, a text message from J.S. mom, talking about leaving early, something about bad weather coming. Please tell Ms. Roberts to check on Madison. We'll try. The countdown had begun. Linda was returning ahead of schedule, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. John had less than 24 hours to prepare for a confrontation that would either save his family or shatter it completely. As night fell over the Morgan residence, Captain John Morgan transformed his living room into a command center, drawing on years of military strategic planning. Time was of the essence with Linda S.'s premature return looming. Karen remained by his side, her educational expertise proving invaluable in documenting the case. I've contacted Judge William Harrison, John said, reviewing his notes. He is an old family friend and has agreed to issue an emergency custody order for all 3 children, effective immediately. He glanced at the clock. 9:47 p.m. The paperwork will be ready by morning. Karen organized the evidence methodically. Financial records, intercepted letters, medical documents, and most crucially, Linda's own journal entries, each piece carefully photographed and digitally backed up. The school board will need to be notified, she added. Linda's position as a counselor gives her access to vulnerable students. They'll want to conduct their own investigation. A text message illuminated Karen's phone. Another update from JS booked morning flights. ETA 10 a.m. tomorrow. Kyle's pretending to be sick to slow her down. I overheard her on the phone with someone named Richard about property closings. John's jaw tightened. Richard Thompson, Linda's attorney, whose signature appeared on both the custody relinquishment papers and the Florida property documents, was another piece of her elaborate escape plan. Madison needs to be moved tonight, John decided, his voice firm but gentle. Karen, would you be willing to take her? Your house is within the school district, and the custody order will cover temporary placement with a licensed teacher. Madison, who had been silently sorting through her mother's old photographs at the dining room table, looked up. What about Jay and Kyle? They tried to help me. Dad, we can't leave them with her. John knelt beside his daughter, struck by her concern for her stepbrothers despite everything she'd endured. The custody order covers all three of you, sweetheart. When Linda arrives tomorrow, the boys will come directly here. Judge Harrison has already arranged for a family counselor to be present, Karen added softly. I've spoken with my sister Beth. She has a trauma counselor in Denver. She is flying in tomorrow to help with the transition. The children will need professional support to process everything. As midnight approached, they executed the plan with military precision. Madison's few belongings were packed and transferred to Karen's house. John documented the kitchen's condition one final time, photographing the makeshift bedroom that would serve as damning evidence of Linda's abuse. Before leaving, Madison paused in the kitchen doorway, clutching her mother's locket. Dad, her voice wavered. Promise you won't let her separate us again. Jay and Kyle, they're my brothers, now, no matter what Linda says. John embraced his daughter, recognizing in her words the same strength that had characterized her mother. I promise, sweetheart, tomorrow we start rebuilding our family, all of us together. As he watched Madison walk safely to Karen's house next door, John Morgan prepared himself for the confrontation to come, a confrontation that would require more than military strategy or legal maneuvering. It would require the delicate balance of justice and mercy, the wisdom to protect his children while acknowledging Linda's illness, and the strength to rebuild what had been broken. The following morning dawned with an almost surreal quietness over the Morgan residence. At precisely 9:47 a.m., surveillance footage from JFK International Airport confirmed what John already knew. Linda was on her way home, accompanied by Jay and Kyle, blissfully unaware that her carefully constructed facade was about to shatter. John sat in his study, surrounded by the evidence of Linda's deception, when the first text from Jay arrived. Mama's acting strange, keeps checking her phone and making calls. Minutes later, another message. She knows something is wrong. The house alarm was triggered last night. Through the window, John could see Karen in her kitchen, preparing breakfast for Madison. His daughter appeared to be sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, curled up on a proper bed, surrounded by the warmth of genuine care. The contrast between the two households couldn't have been more stark. At 10:23 a.m., the sound of tires on gravel announced Linda's arrival. John watched through the study window as she emerged from her luxury SUV, her designer outfit and perfectly coiffed hair a testament to her obsession with appearances. Jay and Kyle followed behind her, their bodies tense, eyes immediately scanning the windows, a learned behavior that spoke volumes about their home life. "Boys, take the bags inside," Linda's voice carried across the morning air, the forced cheerfulness barely masking an undercurrent of tension. "We'll discuss the school transfer over lunch," John observed, noting his stepson's subtle resistance, the slightly slower pace, the exchanged glances, the way Jay positioned himself between his younger brother and their mother. These weren't the actions of troubled teens, but of survivors who had learned to navigate their mother's unpredictable moods. The front door opened, and Linda's manufactured smile froze as she stepped into the foyer. John had intentionally left Madison's school photos on the wall, but added something new: printed copies of Linda's journal entries, medical records, and bank statements, methodically arranged like a grotesque family album. "John!" Linda's voice wavered, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "You're home," she began, her eyes darting to the documents on the wall, then to her sons, who stood rooted in the doorway. "I can explain everything. The boys needed more space, and Madison, she has been so difficult since you left." "Stop!" John's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "The boys know everything, Linda, about the letters you intercepted, about the money you've been moving about Florida." He turned to Jay and Kyle. "Your bags are already packed. Karen's waiting next door. You'll be staying there with your sister while we sort this out." Linda's transformation was instantaneous. The polished facade crumbled, revealing something raw and desperate beneath. "My sons are not going anywhere with that woman. She has poisoned all of you against me just like Emily did, turning my own children, Mom." Jay's voice was steady, years of protected anger finally surfacing. "Melissa slept on a kitchen floor for 6 months. We watched you lock her in, lie to Dad, intercept our letters." Kyle cried. "I cried myself to sleep every night, hearing you through the wall." "It's over." The boys moved toward the door, but Linda's next words stopped them cold. "If you leave now, you'll end up just like your father, alone, worthless, begging to see children who don't want you anymore inside Karen's home." Madison stood at the window, watching the confrontation unfold across the lawn, her fingers instinctively clutching her mother's locket. Beth, Karen's sister, gently placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine suburban landscape, a stark contrast to the emotional tempest brewing within. "Your brothers are coming," Beth said softly, her professional demeanor tempered with genuine warmth, as a trauma counselor who recognized the complex layers of family dynamics unfolding before them. "They're choosing to break the cycle." "Madison," Beth continued, "that takes tremendous courage." Through the window, they watched as Jay and Kyle walked steadily toward Karen's house, their steps becoming more confident with each yard of distance they put between themselves and their mother. Linda's voice carried across the morning air a desperate symphony of threats and pleading that seemed to diminish as the boys approached. Inside Karen's living room, the transformation was immediate. Kyle, the younger brother, who had maintained perfect grades despite the turmoil at home, finally allowed his carefully constructed facade to crumble. He rushed to Madison, enveloping her in a fierce hug. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "We should have done more. We should have told someone sooner. Every night, I could hear you through the wall. I used to play classical music, hoping it would help you sleep." Jay remained by the door, his tall frame rigid with tension. At 17, he had become the family's unofficial protector, a role that had aged him beyond his years. "She has been planning this for months," he revealed, pulling out a folder from his backpack. "The Florida school transfers, the new house, everything. She was going to tell Dad that Madison had run away, that she couldn't handle the troubled teen anymore." Beth moved quietly through the room, her trained eye assessing each child's emotional state. "You've all been carrying this burden alone for too long," she observed. "But look at you now, together, supporting each other. That's not what broken people do, that's what survivors do." The sound of breaking glass from the Morgan house interrupted the moment. Through the window, they could see Linda in full meltdown, her carefully maintained image shattering like the vase she had thrown. John stood calmly, his military training evident in his composed stance as he blocked her path toward Karen's house. "She is not well," Jay explained, his voice tight with emotion. "It hasn't been since Dad left us, but that doesn't excuse what she did to Madison, to any of us." He pulled out his phone, showing a series of text messages. "I've been documenting everything, the threats, the manipulation, the way she'd play us against each other. I knew someday someone would need to know the truth." As the morning progressed, Karen's home became a sanctuary of healing. The three siblings, finally free from their mother's manipulation, began the delicate process of reconnecting. Kyle shared his secret stash of family photos, including ones of Emily that Linda had claimed were lost. Madison showed them her mother's locket, now containing tiny pictures of all three of them. "We're not her weapons anymore," Jay declared, watching as Linda was escorted from the Morgan house by local law enforcement. "We're a family, maybe not the way she wanted, but the way we choose to be." As evening settled over the neighborhood, Karen's home transformed into a makeshift family counseling center. Beth orchestrated a structured but gentle approach to the day's events, understanding that the immediate aftermath of trauma required both professional guidance and personal space. In the living room, John sat with all three children, his military bearing softened by paternal concern. The coffee table between them held a spread of Karen's homemade comfort food largely untouched, yet providing a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. "The judge has granted emergency custody orders," John explained in a steady, reassuring voice. "All three of you will stay here with Karen for the next 72 hours while we secure and document everything at home. Beth will be staying too, to help us navigate this transition." Jay nodded, his protector instincts still evident as he sat slightly forward, positioned between his siblings and the window. "What about Mom's hearing tomorrow? She is being held for psychological evaluation," Beth interjected gently. "The evidence your father gathered, combined with her behavior today, warranted immediate intervention. She'll receive the help she has needed for a long time." Kyle, who had barely spoken since their mother's arrest, finally broke his silence. "Will they make us testify? Make us tell everyone what happened?" His voice carried the weight of years of forced secrecy. "No," John assured them firmly. "The documentation speaks for itself. Your only job now is to heal together." Madison, who had been quietly arranging and rearranging the family photos she'd recovered, looked up at her father. "What about school? Everyone will know by Monday." Karen, who had been discreetly organizing sleeping arrangements, joined the conversation. "I've already spoken with Principal Matthews. We're implementing an immediate support system. You'll each have private counseling available, and your teachers have been briefed to provide academic flexibility while you adjust." As night approached, the practical aspects of their new reality began to settle in. Beth helped establish a routine, understanding that structure would be crucial in the coming days. The siblings would share Karen's converted basement, transformed into a comfortable living space with 3 proper beds, an appointed contrast to Madison's months in the kitchen. Remember, Beth addressed them as they prepared for their first night of genuine freedom. "Healing isn't linear. You'll have good days and hard days, but you'll have them together now, and with a support system that won't fail you." John watched as his children, all three of them, began the delicate process of reclaiming their sense of security. Jay had finally allowed his guard to drop slightly. Accepting a cup of hot chocolate from Karen, Kyle had retrieved his textbooks, finding comfort in the familiar routine of studying, and Madison, his resilient daughter, had fallen asleep on the couch, her mother's locket clutched in one hand and her brother's childhood photo in the other. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and the long process of rebuilding trust. But tonight, in the warm safety of Karen's home, the foundations of healing had begun to take root. The stark fluorescent lights of Brookside Psychiatric Center cast harsh shadows across the consultation room 3 days after Linda's arrest. Dr. Matthews, the facility's chief psychiatrist, sat across from John Morgan, her expression grave as she reviewed the extensive documentation. "Captain Morgan, what we're dealing with here is far more complex than initial reports suggested," Dr. Matthews began in a measured, professional tone. "Linda's psychological evaluation has revealed a severe underlying condition that went untreated for years. The abandonment by her first husband triggered a cascading pattern of paranoid behavior and control mechanisms." John leaned forward, his military posture unwavering despite his exhaustion. "I need to understand, Doctor, how did none of us see this coming?" Dr. Matthews opened Linda's file, revealing years of carefully concealed mental health records. Linda was extraordinarily skilled at compartmentalizing her behavior. As a guidance counselor, she knew exactly how to present herself to the world. She used her professional knowledge to manipulate the system, making any concerns about her behavior seem unfounded. The doctor produced a series of journal entries dating back to John's deployment. These writings show a progressive breakdown in her ability to distinguish reality from her paranoid fantasies. The isolation of Madison wasn't just about punishment, it was about control. In Linda's distorted worldview, Madison represented everything she feared: abandonment, replacement, the loss of her own children's love. A knock at the door interrupted them as Linda's attorney, Richard Thompson, entered with Beth, who had been appointed as the family's advocate. The contrast between them was striking: Richard's polished corporate demeanor against Beth's compassionate professionalism. "We've reviewed the preliminary findings," Richard announced in a clipped tone, "and given the circumstances, we're prepared to discuss terms for a monitored rehabilitation program and supervised visitation rights." "Absolutely not," John said firmly. "The damage she has inflicted on these children goes beyond physical isolation. She's systematically destroyed their sense of security, their trust and family bonds." Jay still positions himself between every door, and his siblings. Kyle can't sleep without checking the locks multiple times, and Madison. He paused, composing himself. Madison still wraps her food in napkins, hiding it away like she did in that kitchen. Dr. Matthews interjected. "The children's current psychological assessments show significant trauma responses. However, they've demonstrated remarkable resilience, particularly in their bonds with each other. These bonds need to be protected and nurtured during their recovery process." The conversation was interrupted by urgent footsteps in the hallway. A nurse appeared at the door, her expression concerned. "Dr. Matthews, Mrs. Morgan is demanding to see her sons. She has become extremely agitated. Security has been called, but she has threatening self-harm if we don't comply." The room tensed. Linda's voice could be heard echoing down the corridor, a haunting mixture of demands and pleading that sent chills through everyone present. "They're my boys. You can't keep them from me. I know what is best for them. I'm their mother." Down the sterile corridor of Brookside Psychiatric Center, Linda's voice grew more frantic. Dr. Matthews motioned for John to remain in the consultation room while she and the security team addressed the situation. The scene that unfolded would become a pivotal moment in the family's journey toward healing. Linda stood in the common area, her previously impeccable appearance now disheveled, her designer outfit replaced by standard facility attire, her carefully maintained facade crumbling with each passing moment. "They're trying to turn my sons against me, just like their father did," she shouted, clutching a framed family photo she'd been allowed to keep in her room. Dr. Matthews approached carefully, her experienced demeanor projecting calm authority. "Linda, let us discuss this in your room. Your sons are safe, and they're being well cared for." "Safe?" Linda's laugh held a sharp edge of hysteria. "You don't understand John's poisoning them against me, just like Emily did." "Perfect, Emily, who still controls this family from beyond. I saw how she did it, turning my own boys into her daughter's protectors. I had to stop it." From the consultation room doorway, John watched the scene unfold, his military training warring with his paternal instincts. Beth stood beside him, documenting every word for the ongoing legal proceedings. "I did what any mother would do," Linda continued, her voice shifting between rage and pleading. "I had to separate them before she took them away from me. The letters, the phone calls, the secret meetings. They were all plotting against me, just like before, just like their father." Dr. Matthews maintained her professional composure, though her expression betrayed her growing concern. "Linda, you stopped taking your medication 8 months ago. These paranoid thoughts aren't reality. Your sons weren't being turned against you, they were trying to protect their sister from abuse." "Abuse?" Linda's voice rose sharply. "I gave them everything: a roof overhead, food, education. I even left them sandwiches when we went away. She is the one who turned my family against me. She is just like her mother, taking everything I love." The security team moved slowly into position as Linda became more agitated in her increasing distress. "I found Emily's letters," she confessed, her words tumbling out in a frenzied stream. "The one she wrote before she died, letters for Madison's birthdays, graduation, wedding day, perfect words from a perfect mother. I couldn't let her when I couldn't let her keep controlling my family from beyond. So, I burned them, every last one, just like I burned John's letters, just like I was going to burn everything that connected them." John's sharp intake of breath echoed in the sudden silence. The letters his late wife had written for their daughter's future milestones, precious words he'd searched for after Emily's death, had been destroyed in Linda's campaign to erase Emily's memory from their lives. Dr. Matthews saw the moment of vulnerability. "Linda, this isn't about Emily or Madison. This is about your unresolved trauma from your first marriage. You're projecting those fears onto your current family, creating enemies where there are none." Linda's composure crumbled entirely as Dr. Matthews' words penetrated her carefully constructed defenses. She sank to her knees, still clutching the family photograph, her carefully maintained facade finally shattering completely. "I had a dream last week," she whispered, her voice taking on an eerily calm quality. "I saw my first husband with Emily. They were laughing, planning to take all my children away. Emily was holding Madison's hand, but Jay and Kyle were there too. They were calling her Mom. She looked up at Dr. Matthews, her eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what it's like to watch your children being stolen piece by piece by a dead woman?" John stepped forward, unable to remain silent any longer. "No one was stealing them. Linda, Emily's memory was a threat to you," he said. "She was a mother who loved her daughter enough to write letters for every milestone. She knew she'd miss you. You didn't just destroy papers, you destroyed Madison's connection to her mother." Linda's attention snapped to John, her expression shifting rapidly between vulnerability and defiance. You don't understand. I had to protect my family, the Florida house, the new schools. It was all for them. Away from her influence, away from all of this, we could have been happy." Dr. Matthews signaled the security team to stand down as she knelt beside Linda. "You're describing paranoid delusions, Linda. Your fear of abandonment created enemies where there were none. Emily was a threat, and Madison was stealing your sons. They formed bonds because they're siblings who care for each other." "But the letters," Linda persisted, her voice small. "John wrote to you every week, pages and pages about how special you were, how proud he was. Jay found them and asked why his father never wrote like that. Kyle cried when he read them. I had to protect them from feeling unloved again." The revelation struck John like a physical blow. The letters he'd written to Madison hadn't just been intercepted, they'd become weapons in Linda's psychological warfare, hurting all three children in different ways. "Your sons weren't jealous of those letters," Linda began, but Beth interjected gently. "They were proud of their sister. They tried to protect her, because that's what family does. The only one creating division was you." Linda's grip on the photograph loosened, the frame clattered to the floor. The glass cracked, creating a web of fractures across the smiling faces of their once united family. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, the fight finally leaving her body. "I just couldn't bear to lose them again, not like before, not like him." Dr. Matthews helped Linda to her feet, signaling for a nurse to bring medication. "This is the first step," she said. "Linda, acknowledging these fears and understanding their source is the beginning of real healing, not just for you, but for everyone you've hurt." As Linda was led away, John retrieved the cracked photograph from the floor. Through the shards of broken glass, he could see the truth. They'd all missed the signs of Linda's deterioration, which had been there all along, hidden behind perfect smiles and carefully staged happiness. In the quiet solitude of Karen's living room, John Morgan faced the difficult task of sharing the day's revelations with his children. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows as Beth and Karen sat nearby, providing silent support for what would become one of the most challenging conversations of their lives. "Your mother's letters," John began, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "The ones Mom wrote before she passed away." Madison and Linda found them paused, searching for the right words to convey such a profound loss. Madison, who had been absently stroking her mother's locket, looked up sharply. "The birthday letters, the ones you said Mom wrote for me." Her voice trembled with understanding. "They're gone, aren't they?" John nodded, the weight of the loss evident in his bearing. "Linda burned them, sweetheart. She saw them as a threat to her relationship with all of you. In her mind, your mother's presence, even through those letters, was somehow stealing her family away." J.'s reaction was immediate and visceral. He stood abruptly, his tall frame rigid with anger. "She had no right," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Those letters weren't hers to destroy. They weren't about her at all." His hands clenched into fists at his sides, years of suppressed rage finally finding focus. Kyle, ever the quiet observer, spoke up from his position by the window. "I remember finding one of them once in Mom's desk drawer. I only saw the envelope. It said for Madison's 16th birthday in really pretty handwriting. When I asked about it, Mom said it was just old paperwork and locked the drawer." Beth leaned forward, her professional demeanor softening with compassion. "What Linda did was an act of profound violation. She didn't just destroy paper, she tried to erase a mother's final gifts to her daughter. But she couldn't erase the love those letters represented." Madison suddenly moved to the family photo album she'd rescued from the kitchen, her hands trembling as she pulled out a worn photograph of Emily taken just weeks before her death. I used to imagine what those letters said, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. On bad nights in the kitchen, I'd make up words I thought Mom might have written and helped me feel less alone. The revelation struck John like a physical blow. While he had been deployed, believing his daughter was safe and cared for, she had been lying on a kitchen floor, creating imaginary letters from her dead mother for comfort. The magnitude of Linda's actions, not just the physical isolation, but the emotional devastation she had inflicted, became devastatingly clear. There's more, John continued, knowing they needed to understand the full scope of Linda's deception. The letters I wrote to you, Madison, Linda didn't just hide them, she used them to hurt your brothers too. In Karen's living room, the weight of John's revelation hung heavy in the air. The setting sun cast a golden glow through the windows, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that belied the gravity of the moment. Beth positioned herself closer to the siblings, recognizing the delicate nature of what was about to be disclosed. Linda showed you my letters, didn't she? Madison asked her brother softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's why you started leaving notes and food. You knew the truth before anyone else. Jay, his composure maintained through years of protecting his siblings, finally cracked. She would read them to us, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Every time Dad wrote about how proud he was of you, how much he missed you, she'd say, "See, this is what a father's love looks like. Your father never wrote letters like this." Kyle moved closer to his sister, his academic facade falling away to reveal the vulnerable 14-year-old beneath. But it had the opposite effect of what she intended, he explained. Instead of making us resent you, it showed us what she was doing, the way she twisted everything into a weapon. John watched his children, his military training providing little defense against the pain of witnessing their shared trauma. Linda used those letters to try to create division, he explained gently. She believed that by highlighting the differences in how I expressed love, she could drive you apart. Instead, she brought you closer together. She didn't understand. Jay, he continued, steadying his voice every time she read those letters. Trying to hurt us, we saw more clearly what real parental love looked like. It made us realize how wrong everything was at home. Madison reached for her brother's hands, forming a circle that represented their unbreakable bond. I used to hear Kyle playing classical music at night, she whispered through the kitchen wall. I never knew it was for me. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Kyle confirmed, tears falling freely. Now, Mom used to play it when we were little, before Dad left. I thought maybe it would help you feel less alone. Beth interjected softly, her professional insight guiding the conversation. What you three have done is remarkable. Instead of allowing Linda's actions to divide you, you've created your own support system. You've transformed her weapons of division into bonds of unity. The sibling circle tightened, their shared pain becoming a foundation for healing rather than a source of division. John watched as his daughter and stepson's victims of a tragedy, not of their making, demonstrated a strength and resilience that transcended their years. There is something else you should know, John added, knowing they needed the full truth to move forward. Linda had plans that would have affected all of you. The Florida house, the new schools, it was just about moving away it was about. In Karen's living room, as evening settled into night, John Morgan prepared to share the most devastating aspect of Linda's plans. The room had grown quiet, with only the gentle hum of the heating system providing background to this difficult moment. The Florida arrangements weren't just about a fresh start, John began, his military bearing providing the strength needed to continue. Linda had filed paperwork to relinquish custody of Madison to the state, citing fabricated behavioral issues. She had orchestrated an elaborate plan to permanently separate you three, using her position as a guidance counselor to manipulate the system. The impact of this revelation rippled through the room. Madison's grip on her brother's hands tightened, while Jay's protective stance became more pronounced. Kyle, the academic whose intelligence had always been his shield, appeared to physically diminish under the weight of this knowledge. The documentation we found, John continued, showed that she had already arranged for Jay and Kyle to attend separate private schools in Florida. The plan was to isolate each of you, removing any possibility of maintaining contact. She had even begun spreading carefully crafted rumors about Madison's mental state among her colleagues at school. Beth intervened professionally, recognizing the trauma response building in the siblings. This revelation isn't meant to hurt you further, she explained gently. Understanding the full scope of Linda's actions is crucial for your healing process. It validates the fear and uncertainty you've all been carrying. Jay broke the heavy silence that followed. She told us the Florida schools were opportunities, elite academic programs that would guarantee our futures, but she always avoided explaining why we couldn't attend the same school. His composure cracked slightly. I would have lost both my siblings. Kyle, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke with unexpected clarity. She was recreating her own trauma. When our father left, he separated us from our old life completely. She was doing the same thing, but convincing herself it was for our protection. Madison, who had endured months of isolation in the kitchen, demonstrated remarkable strength as she addressed her brothers firmly. Because what she tried to destroy made us stronger. Every note you slipped under the door, every midnight snack, every classical music piece. They weren't just acts of kindness, they were acts of defiance against her plan to separate us. John watched as his children, faced with the darkest truth of their ordeal, chose unity over despair. The tragedy of Linda's planned destruction of our family has instead cemented bonds that transcend blood relations and legal documents. He said, "There's one more thing you need to know." Reaching for a folder Beth had brought from the psychiatric facility, he continued, Linda's evaluation revealed severe, untreated trauma and paranoid delusions. The woman who did these things was entirely the same person who first brought our families together in the serene confines of Dr. Matthews' office at Brookside Psychiatric Center. The morning light filtered through Venetian blinds as Dr. Matthews presented Linda's comprehensive psychological evaluation to John Morgan and Beth. The thick manila folder on her desk contained decades of medical history that painted a disturbing picture of untreated trauma and escalating mental illness. Captain Morgan, Dr. Matthews began, her voice carrying the weight of professional concern. Linda's condition is the result of severe childhood abandonment issues, exacerbated by her first husband's departure. Her medical records reveal a pattern of increasingly paranoid behavior that began long before your marriage. She opened the file, revealing psychiatric evaluations dating back to Linda's adolescence. At age 12, Linda's father abandoned her family without warning. This traumatic event created deep-seated abandonment anxiety that manifested in increasingly controlling behavior. Her first marriage triggered these underlying issues, and your deployment became the catalyst for a complete psychological break. Beth, reviewing her own notes, added context to the revelation. The timing is crucial here. Linda's decision to stop taking her prescribed medication coincided almost exactly with your deployment orders, Captain Morgan. The combination of your absence and her unmedicated state created a perfect storm of paranoid delusions. Dr. Matthews continued, her professional demeanor softening slightly. In Linda's distorted reality, Emily's continued presence in your family through photographs, letters, and Madison's resemblance to her mother became evidence of an elaborate conspiracy to steal her children. Every act of sibling affection between Madison and her brothers was interpreted as proof of this imagined plot. John, who had maintained his composure through countless military briefings, found himself struggling to reconcile this clinical analysis with the woman he had married. But the calculated nature of her actions, the intercepted letters, the Florida plans, the systematic isolation of Madison, these don't seem like the actions of someone who has lost touch with reality. That's what makes her condition so complex, Dr. Matthews explained, turning to a detailed psychological profile. Linda's professional training as a guidance counselor allowed her to maintain a facade of normalcy, while her paranoid delusions intensified. She used her understanding of the school system and child psychology to orchestrate what she genuinely believed was a rescue mission, saving her sons from what she perceived as the corrupting influence of Emily's memory. She produced a journal entry dated just weeks before John's early return. The handwriting, once elegant and controlled, had become increasingly erratic. The boys smiled at her today, just like Emily used to smile. They're becoming hers, just like everything else. The Florida house is ready once we're away from her influence. They'll all remember who their real mother is. They'll all understand I did this to protect them, and they'll all love me again. The revelation hung heavy in the air. Linda's actions, while methodically executed, had been driven not by malice, but by a profound mental illness that distorted her perception of reality and love itself. At Brookside Psychiatric Center's family consultation room, Dr. Matthews continued her detailed explanation of Linda's psychological state to John and Beth. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the consultation table, where Linda's extensive medical records tell a story of progressive psychological deterioration. What we're seeing here, Dr. Matthews explained, indicating a series of brain scans, is the physiological impact of untreated trauma and severe anxiety. Linda's decision to discontinue her medication created a cascade effect in her neurochemistry, fundamentally altering her perception of reality. John studied the medical data before him. His military training and threat assessment provided an unexpected framework for understanding the situation. The progression seems to have accelerated after my deployment, he observed, noting the dates on various psychological evaluations. Precisely, Dr. Matthews confirmed. Your deployment triggered what we call a catastrophic regression. Linda's childhood abandonment trauma resurfaced, combining with her fears about her first marriage and her compromised mental state. She began seeing parallels between her past and present that didn't exist. Beth, reviewing her notes from recent therapy sessions, added crucial context. During our last session, Linda revealed something significant. She described having recurring nightmares where her first husband and Emily were conspiring together, planning to take all 3 children away. In her dreams, the children would transform altogether, taking on Emily's features. Dr. Matthews opened a leather-bound journal, Linda's private writings from the months leading up to the crisis. Listen to this entry from April. Today, I saw Emily in all of them the way Jay protects Madison, just like Emily used to protect her younger daughter, the way Kyle reads with her, sharing books like Emily did with her students. They're becoming her children, not mine. I have to save them before it's too late. The revelation struck John with particular force. The very bonds between the siblings that he had seen as a sign of family healing were, in Linda's mind, evidence of her worst fears coming true. The most concerning aspect, Dr. Matthews continued, was Linda's ability to maintain her professional facade while her internal reality crumbled. As a guidance counselor, she used her understanding of the system to validate her delusions. Every interaction between the siblings was documented and reframed as evidence of Emily's continuing influence. She produced a series of official-looking documents, Linda S. professional observations of Madison S. behavior at school that should have been routine academic reports, but instead became detailed manifestos of imagined manipulation and conspiracy, all written in the measured language of a mental health professional. "This is why we couldn't see it," Beth interjected softly. Linda wasn't just hiding her illness. She was using her professional expertise to create a paper trail that would justify her actions. Every report, every documented incident, was building toward her ultimate goal of separating the children to protect them from an influence that existed only in her mind. The weight of understanding settled over the room. Linda's actions, while undeniably harmful, emerged from a place of profound mental illness rather than deliberate malice. Her attempt to destroy one family had been driven by her desperate, delusional attempt to save another one that existed only in her fractured perception of reality. In the late afternoon sunlight of Brookside Psychiatric Center's family consultation room, Dr. Matthews presented her final assessment and treatment recommendations. The gravity of the situation is reflected in the careful arrangement of documents before me, each representing a different aspect of the complex path forward. Linda's treatment will require long-term specialized care, Dr. Matthews explained, addressing John and Beth. "We're recommending a minimum 6-month residential program at our trauma recovery unit, followed by intensive outpatient therapy. The goal isn't just to stabilize her current condition, but to address the deep-rooted trauma that led to this crisis." John studied the treatment plan, his military background evident in his methodical view of each detail and the children. How do we help them process this understanding of their mother's illness while still acknowledging the real harm they've suffered? Beth opened her therapeutic assessment folder, revealing detailed notes on each child's current emotional state. "We're proposing a dual approach, individual therapy sessions for each child, focusing on their specific experiences and trauma, combined with carefully structured family therapy sessions. The key is helping them understand that acknowledging Linda's illness doesn't invalidate their pain or their right to feel hurt by her actions." Dr. Matthews nodded in agreement. Jay, in particular, shows signs of what we call parentification, taking on adult responsibilities to protect his siblings. While his actions were admirable, he needs support in reclaiming his role as a teenager. Kyla's academic perfectionism appears to be a coping mechanism, and Madison's experiences will require specialized, trauma-informed therapy. The discussion then turned to practical matters of legal guardianship and ongoing care. "The court has granted you full custody of all 3 children," Beth confirmed, presenting the official documentation. "However, we recommend maintaining some form of controlled contact with Linda as her treatment progresses, always supervised and guided by therapeutic professionals." John's expression reflected the weight of responsibility he now carried. How do we move forward as a family? How do we rebuild trust while honoring both the pain and the potential for healing? Dr. Matthews' response was measured and thoughtful. The fact that the siblings maintain their bonds despite Linda's attempts to separate them shows remarkable resilience. We'll build on that foundation, helping them understand that their mother's illness doesn't diminish the reality of their experiences or the strength they found in each other. As the meeting concluded, the path forward became clearer, not easier, but more defined. The family would face a long journey of healing, understanding, and reconstruction, guided by professionals who understood both the complexity of trauma and the possibility of recovery. 6 months after the events at Brookside Psychiatric Center, the Morgan residence had undergone a transformation that went far beyond its physical appearance. The autumn morning light streamed through newly installed windows, illuminating a home that had become a testament to healing and resilience. In the renovated kitchen, now a warm and welcoming space, John Morgan stood preparing breakfast with Madison. The old mattress and makeshift bedroom were long gone, replaced by a state-of-the-art cooking island where father and daughter shared their morning routine. Their easy conversation and synchronized movement spoke of months spent rebuilding their relationship through simple, everyday moments. "The college counselor was impressed with your story," John mentioned as he carefully flipped a pancake. "She said your perspective on family resilience was particularly compelling." Madison, arranging fresh fruit on 3 plates, smiled softly. Her recent academic achievements had become a source of pride for the entire family, marking her successful return to the top of her class. From upstairs came the familiar sound of classical music, Kyle practicing his morning piano routine. The instrument, a recent addition to their home, had become a symbol of his emotional recovery. What had once been a secret comfort offered through kitchen walls was now an open expression of familial support and artistic passion. Jay entered the kitchen, his athletic gear indicating his return from an early morning run at 18. He had gradually learned to release his self-imposed role of family protector, though his protective instincts remained evident in gentler, healthier ways. "Coach says I have a good shot at the college sports scholarship," he announced, accepting a glass of orange juice from his sister. The morning routine, so ordinary on its surface, represented months of careful therapeutic work. Each family member had found their own path toward healing, while maintaining the bonds that had sustained them through their darkest times. The kitchen, once a place of isolation and fear, had become the heart of their reconstructed family life. Karen, who had transitioned from emergency guardian to trusted family friend, appeared at the back door with her usual warm smile. Her presence had become an integral part of their support system, her home remaining a safe haven even after the immediate crisis had passed. "The garden club meeting is this afternoon," she reminded them, accepting a cup of coffee from John. "Beth thinks it would be good for Madison to share her herb gardening project." The mention of Beth was casual now. The trauma counselor's role had evolved from crisis intervention to supportive guidance. Her steady presence had helped the family navigate the complex emotions surrounding Linda's treatment and their own healing process. 3 weeks before Christmas, John Morgan sat in Dr. Matthews' office at Brookside Psychiatric Center for their monthly family progress review. The winter sun cast a gentle glow through the frosted windows, highlighting the positive changes documented in the reports before them. "The children's progress has been remarkable," Dr. Matthews noted, reviewing her latest assessments. "Jay has successfully transitioned to a more age-appropriate role within the family, excelling in both academics and athletics. His college applications show a young man who has found healthy ways to channel his protective instincts into future career aspirations in child advocacy law." John nodded, remembering how Jay's experiences had shaped his decision to pursue a legal career focused on family protection, and how Kyle's music therapy had been exceptionally effective. Dr. Matthews confirmed that his piano performances have become a form of emotional expression that benefits the entire family. "The weekly recitals he gives at the local children's ward here have been particularly therapeutic, both for him and our young patients." The conversation then turned to Madison's progress. "Her involvement in the school's peer support program has been transformative," Dr. Matthews continued, "and by helping other students navigate family challenges, she has found a way to transform her own experiences into a source of strength for others." John shared recent photographs of their renovated home, including the new family room where weekly therapy sessions now took place, a space designed with input from all 3 children, promoting both individual healing and family bonding. When it came to Linda's treatment, John inquired with a mix of concern and cautious hope. Dr. Matthews opened Linda's file, revealing detailed progress notes from her residential program. She is responding well to the intensive therapy. The medication management has stabilized her condition, and she has begun to process the reality of her actions without the filter of paranoid delusions. Her recent letter to the children, which Beth reviewed, shows significant progress in understanding the impact of her behavior. The mention of letters carries particular weight, given their history under therapeutic supervision. Linda has begun writing carefully monitored communications to the children, not seeking forgiveness, but acknowledging their pain and her responsibility for it. The supervised family session planned for next month will be crucial. It will be the first time all 3 children have agreed to be present. Beth will facilitate, focusing on establishing healthy boundaries while allowing for the possibility of carefully managed future interactions. As John prepared to leave, Dr. Matthews shared one final observation. What is most encouraging is how your family has redefined itself. The bonds between the siblings, forged in adversity, have grown stronger through healing. They've learned that family isn't just about blood or legal ties. It's about choosing to support and protect each other, even in the hardest circumstances. On Christmas Eve, 1 year after John's unexpected return, the Morgan home radiated warmth and renewal. The living room, adorned with thoughtfully chosen decorations, reflected the family's journey from trauma to healing. Each ornament on the tree held special significance, crafted as a symbol of their collective resilience. Karen and Beth had joined the family celebration not as professional supports, but as cherished extended family members. Kyle sat at the piano, his fingers dancing across the keys in a melody that spoke of hope rather than hiding. Jay, coming home from his college interviews, shared animated stories about his plans to advocate for families in crisis. Madison expressed her commitment to helping other young people find their voice through writing and peer support. As midnight approached, John Morgan looked around at his transformed family. The military captain who had once discovered his daughter sleeping on a kitchen floor had learned profound lessons about strength, resilience, and the power of unconditional love. Their story, marked by both tragedy and triumph, had become a testament to the enduring spirit of family, not as a perfect institution, but as a continuous journey of growth, understanding, and healing. The clock struck 12, and snow began to fall softly outside. In the gentle piano notes of Kyle's playing, the warm laughter of siblings sharing stories, and the supportive presence of their extended family of choice, the Morgan household had become more than a rebuilt home. It was a sanctuary of hope, understanding, and unwavering love. In the depths of every family's journey lies a profound truth about resilience and redemption. The story of the Morgan family reminds us that even in our golden years, the power to heal, forgive, and rebuild remains eternally present. Like many of us who have witnessed the evolution of family dynamics over decades, their tale speaks to the heart of what it means to be a parent, a child, and a protector of those we love. Through military service, personal loss, and the complexities of blended families, we learn that strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. Just as we've watched our own children grow and face life as challenges, the Morgan siblings show us that youth can possess wisdom beyond their years, finding light in the darkest corners of adversity. Their story mirrors the experiences many of us have faced, the delicate balance of protecting our loved ones while allowing them to grow, the courage to confront mental health issues that our generation often kept hidden, and the realization that family bonds transcend blood relations. It reminds us that even at our age, it's never too late to heal old wounds, rebuild broken bridges, and create new traditions that honor both our past and our future. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this.